It's the Blues Rock Show with Pete Francis and Willie Witten.
Welcome to the Blues Rock Show. I'm Pete Francis, joined by Willie Witten. Today, our special guest is Bluhauz, who just released his debut album. And this is an album we had listed on our most anticipated albums of 2021. So Bluhauz, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Pete and Willie, for having me again. We spoke, Pete, during the pandemic last year, I remember. So it's good to be back in the show and announcing the album. Now, we talked about it before. Now it's a reality.
Yeah, now it's reality. You had put out a couple singles before, and now the whole album is out there and kind of into the world. What were you looking to achieve with this album? It is a very fresh sounding album.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much. I mean, it's really the first experience that I have as a solo artist, right? I always been in bands, that kind of democracy, that kind of like writing songs together, everybody putting their ideas. So this was like my own baby, to say it, you know? So I spent time just writing on my own, just seeing what ideas come from you naturally without anybody else interfering in your ideas, right? So for me, it's really like planting that seed to begin this new chapter. I don't see it like as the main goal, you know. It's like, we're back, here's my album, but let's talk again in the fourth album, you know. That's my mentality. So for me, it's kind of like a rebirth of a new chapter, to go solo, to try new things with a more mature mindset in all sense, as a person, as knowing about the industry, about playing and everything. So yeah, it's really like a new life.
So this album, because I think of your work with Stone Giant, that was hard prog rock, a lot of mystical, dark energy.
Yeah.
And then this album that you just released, I'm listening to it. I'm like, wow, there's a little bit of reggae. There's some gospel. There's, of course, some rock. There's a lot of stuff. All of it you're very well versed in. Is this stuff you had been saving up for a while, or did you just come to it when you said, hey, this is the album I'm going to write?
I think so. That's a nice way of putting it. I think it's something that I was waiting to do eventually on my own. I've always had that kind of bluesy, gospel, soul kind of vibe and influences. But when you're in a band, you start adapting, right? So maybe these ideas that you're hearing in this album would come in a rehearsal of Stone Giant, but being filtered by all the people and the influences and the personalities, it becomes what you hear on that Stone Giant album, right? Which is definitely more hard rock. All that prog you talk about is because we spend so many hours rehearsing and jamming and improvising that those instrumental things you don't really compose on the studio or by your own. You have to like have hours of rehearsal for that to be crafted out, you know? So, but yes, I definitely feel, I mean, I don't want to, Stone Giant was a great moment and we did some great music, and I'm grateful for that. But I guess I can feel more myself with this sounds, with what I'm saying on the lyrics, with how I'm playing guitar. It's all about eventually giving yourself the opportunity to also enjoy the music that you're playing. Also, when you play live, you want to play something that you enjoy, not something super hard that you're thinking too much of how you're going to do that performance, right? I really like that jamming and open thing, you know, like in the Keep on Rolling, one of the main tracks, the song fades out with a solo. But when I'm live, I might solo for 10 minutes. We'll see how much the audience lets me solo, you know? So I leave those open spaces for my interpretation in the moment. But yes, definitely the styles that you're talking about, I feel way more identified with those. And like I said, this is just like the first ideas as a solo artist that I'm expressing, you know? So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, one of the tracks that kind of has stood out to me as being a little different, and it's not one of the singles that you've already put out, it's Generation Calling. I thought that had a very kind of fresh, cool sound to it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that track?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the most powerful tracks in the album for me too. The reason I put out those singles this year it's because they blend a bit more with a more pop, bluesy, chill vibe to kind of mix with everything that the album has, right? Which is in its essence, it's more rock and roll than what you're hearing on the singles, I guess. But that song was made spontaneously in the studio. We just put a beat like and I started, I started doing that melody, and then it just stick to my head. And then we put up some fuzzy guitars. It reminded me a bit of like, Are You Satisfied by Rain Wolf? You know that sound?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So I said, let's mix it with that song too, with those guitar sounds. And then it just became kind of like an anthem. And I brought the gospel singer, Mariel Epps. I brought her into the studio. She was referred by a friend. And then we started talking. And all of a sudden, she was telling us stories with Michael Jackson. She did backing vocals for Bowie, for Prince, for a very famous Argentine guitarist called Papo. So it was like one of those things that I didn't plan for it, but it ended up being that way. And yeah, it's going to be a powerful track to play live. It's definitely more instruments. I also got my friend from Berkeley, Stefano, on the violin, So it's kind of like this epic track, kind of like for a Tarantino movie.
Yeah, it sounds great. I loved it.
Thank you.
One of the questions you talked about, a famous Argentine guitarist, and that's where you're from. You spent a lot of time by way of Miami and then through Berkeley. I'd like to ask, looking at the South American rock, and blues scene, how is it different from the North American scene that's going on? Do you keep in touch with it? Are there things that you think that we, or at least Pete and I, as primarily North American listeners, are missing out? Who are some great bands that are South American based right now that the American audiences are missing out on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about right now, like specifically right now, new bands that are doing this rock and roll sound down in Argentina. But we've always been like a very rock-oriented country. The people go crazy. The big artists love going to Argentina because when you go to play a show, the audience just sinks back to the songs. It's like they're watching a football match, soccer. So they go crazy and they love it. There's a lot of rock and roll crowds there. I've played with Stone Giant, Lollapalooza, and a bunch of other festivals with Gorillaz, Arcade Fire, and the crowd just goes crazy. And of course, when they realized that I was from Argentina as well, their connection was even bigger, right? But my influences always have been from the classic rock, from London times, the blues in the US. So even though I lived in Argentina for some time of my life, I've always been listening to the English dudes, on the blues and what's going on here in the US. But if you look at the bands from the 70s in Argentina, like Papo, there's this band called Pescado Rabioso, which means like a wild fish, by this very famous Argentinian composer called Luis Spinetta. That was his name. Then you have like Charlie Garcia. All these people, they were kind of mimicking what was going on in the blues. Papo really sounds like a British kind of guitar player, like Eric Clapton kind of in a sense. So they all really got that influences from here, from the US, from the blues, from England. I'm not sure about today, to be honest, what band would make that cut, but I'll have to send you a list of like some really great 70s, 80s rock and roll Argentinian bands that you're going to love. It sounds like Sabbath and Zeppelin. It sounds all like that.
So you also mentioned that your roots have always been in the classic rock, sort of that British rock. I've heard stories, and I don't know how many of them are true, but when you took that attitude to Berklee College of Music, how was that received? Because I've heard, and maybe I'm wrong, that there's an impetus, there's a push to make you more into a sparkly, polished jazz guy, but you seem to have come through Berklee with all your rock roots intact. How did you manage? How was that received?
Yeah, that's a good question, and something that I always think about. I don't like to say it this way, but in a sense, the school changed after not just me, but after my generation of the musicians that I went there. You know, it all, the planets aligned, and there were a lot of rock and roll players during my time. And making Stone Giant was a big step to kind of influence others as well on making their own rock bands. In the college, you know, we were like the band that would play everywhere, you know, and the festivals and the venues and the parties. We've done all that, right? And it opened up like this rock and roll scene in Berkeley that when I got there, it wasn't there, to be honest. And the first 2 semesters I did, my guitar teachers were pushing me to play jazz. So the first Berkeley exam I did Donna Lee by Charlie Parker, like all that, you know. And then I did some Wes Montgomery, and by my 3rd semester I said, this is not who I am. This is not why I came here. So I switched from that, and I played the solo of David Gilmour, Comfortably Numb, for an exam. And from there, I just started telling my teachers, you know, I want to do rock and roll. I started getting together with friends. It's very important to meet outside class, right? In the rehearsal space, we would spend hours at night jamming with people from all over the place, but it was always very rock and roll, blues oriented guitarists who want to come and solo. So we kind of like developed this scene, to be honest. And now there's way more rock and roll bands. It's way more accepted. There's a lot of bands going on. And then, of course, the final dessert that we put with the Jimmy Page graduation, you know, that was like just finishing everything the best way possible, and just opening up this rock and roll scene in Berkeley that now is way more open.
Yeah, and you just mentioned Jimmy Page. You were able to make a connection with him at a fairly young age. How did that come about? And can you tell us more about your connection with him?
Yeah. This is a story that I told all over the press in Argentina when it happened, when I used to travel there. But I don't think I told it here too much. But I mean, rare things in life. When I was younger, I ended up dating a girl that I'm still in touch with sometimes. She ended up being Jimmy Page's niece. Crazy situation. So from there, it was just like I gotta have the opportunity to meet him at some point. So when I was 19, I went to London and I met him. He saw me play guitar. He really opened up. We started talking about everything. We just had like a nice moment, very surreal moment. You know, me asking him questions for an hour. It felt like an interview. And from then on, I said, I'm gonna, there was just a feeling that I had that I said, I'm gonna meet him again, but through my own means, you know, not somebody who invites me here. So when I was about to graduate Berkeley, they always bring major artists for the commencement, right? They brought Bowie, Steven Tyler, B.B. King, everybody's been there. So I make an approach and I'm like, hey, we have this connection with Jimmy Page, you know, why don't we bring him to Berkeley and just do this whole ceremony and give him the honorary doctorate, which is what they do, and then you play a concert. Very like naive, like if you wanted, this is a possibility. And I was on a trip during the summer and I got a call and it's like, hey, he's coming. He said, yes, let's go. So wow, that was like, okay, now it's actually happened. So we went back to Boston, we planned the whole concert. And we ended up playing for like 10,000 people in the Boston University Stadium in the Gaines Arena. And Jimmy was on row number 4. And I kind of made a team of the rock and roll friends that we had in Berkeley. And we ended up playing, like, we did Stairway, we did Good Times, Bad Times, How Many More Times, we did The Ocean. With him on the audience, you know, it was like, it was crazy. So yeah, that's a very funny situation of how things happen. I remember after the show, I had a meeting with one of the Berkeley people, and he introduced me to another person. He said, like, here's the guy who ruined commencement forever. You know, like we won't top that for years. You know, it was just a great moment that I'm gonna carry it with me forever, and I guess I'll keep talking about this story forever because it's like, how did I end up here? You know.
You said
Yeah, and so you're covering Led Zeppelin in front of Jimmy Page. So what are your nerves like in a situation like that?
Pete, I spent 4 months every single night learning those parts. Even when I knew them by heart, I would still practice because Jimmy's soloing is very strange. You know, it's just that thing that either you have to really pay attention or just he's the only one who does it. You know, the way he moves the fingers and the licks he's doing. So I spent months just rehearsing over and over the same solo. You know, I ended up playing the solo for Stairway, but to be honest, there was no nerves in the situation. I was very an automatic pilot, very focused on the important task that I had to play for all those people and Jimmy in the audience. We went to a bar across the street with the band and we had some tequila shots. I don't know if Berkeley knows about this. We were above 21, so it's fine to say it. And we went back on stage and it was, I don't know, it was really to this day one of the most, if not the most, like mental powerful shows I've done. You know, it really felt like an out of body experience. Like you could see yourself moving the fingers, but you're just like an automatic. And yeah, to this day it was very spiritual moment, as to say.
You said you got to speak with Jimmy for about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any key little nuggets of wisdom or tips or just stories that he shared with you that, if you can share them, really stuck in your mind?
Look, I wish I would remember everything, but it was such a rush that I don't remember everything I took. So this was the last day that I was in London before going back. That was the day that we really hit it off. I was playing with his son. We were jamming. He was playing drums and I was playing guitar. And he was on the other room. I knew I had a few hours before I left and I hadn't had that connection that I wanted with him. So I said, Ashen to his son, hey, let's go play. So I started playing really loud and all of a sudden the door opens and you can see Jimmy just like, what are you guys doing here, you know? And then he just came literally in front of me. I was like just playing and he was like looking at me play. And then I ended up playing and that's when he opened up to me. You know, he started asking me questions. He even said like, how are you going to the airport? And I said, I'll just take a taxi, you know, because we were like in outside London. And he said, don't worry, I'll take you. So he calls up a taxi and he was in the front with the driver. I was in the back and it was like an hour drive to the Heathrow airport, right? So it was just blasting questions till the moment that the driver, who was kind of Jimmy's age, he looks at him and he's like, who are you? Right? Because I was like asking. And I said, you don't know who he is? And he didn't know because Jimmy hadn't appeared yet and it might get loud. So you maybe didn't know how he looked at that time. And I said, I better not say it. I better not say it because what I'm going to be like, hey, this is Jimmy Bear. What? So I just stay quiet. But I asked him everything, man. I asked him like if he knew Jimi Hendrix. I think he said no. I think he said he never met Jimmy. I asked him about if he knew how to read music because I was kind of worried about that going to audition to Berkeley. And he said he didn't really need it, right? But during the session times, they would like put like a chord chart to him, and he was very good at like making riffs around the chords, not just playing the chords. So he became kind of like known about that, like very good making riffs around chord progressions. Then I asked him about I told him I was going to Berkeley. He said you should definitely do it. I don't know. I asked him about soccer too. He said he was a very fan of like Manchester City or Manchester United, and Tevez, who is like an Argentine player, very famous in soccer. Yeah. What else? I did ask him something that I had a question about. When you listen to the album, and this can be like a lesson for recording and touring artists. When you listen to the album of Led Zeppelin, all the albums, and you listen to the live show, there's something different going on, right? You know, you guys notice that.
Yes.
there's way more improvisation and openness. I'm not actually playing the exact parts or the exact solo as the recording. So that's what he said. You know, he said the studio is one world, the live show is another show. And the thrilling part of the live shows of Zeppelin, he said that they would go out and play not knowing what was going to happen in that show musically, right? They would go out with an open mind, not knowing what was going to happen in the song. Maybe they started playing a cover in the middle of the song, or the solo goes for like a minute. So that really stuck to me. And because sometimes you hear a band's album and then you go see them live and it sounds like they're just putting play, and it sounds exactly like the album. Sometimes we want that raw experience in a live show and let it extend. So that stuck with me too, and I definitely take it to the stage when I do that.
Imagine being that cab driver who drove Jimmy Page around for an hour and didn't even know it.
Yeah, maybe then he saw the movie.
Yep, it might get loud, and then he's like, "Wow, I really messed out."
Yeah, that's when that's how Jimmy looks now, right? In the 2000s, right?
Yeah.
So that's what happened, and I remember I said bye, you know. I said good luck on the movie. He was about to release that movie. I don't know, man. It's just we can stay here for hours talking about that. I'll start remembering, you know. But it was just a thrill, you know.
Yeah, that is super cool. So the debut album just dropped. Any final thoughts, and where can people kind of hear your music?
Well, you can hear it everywhere. We released the album through The Orchard, which is Sony Music's distribution label. So they're helping us out, put it everywhere on Spotify, on YouTube, everywhere, Apple Music, iTunes. You can find me on Instagram. My name is Bluhauz, but it's not written, I don't know, this is maybe backwards, but it's not written as a normal Bluhauz, you know? It's without the E and the house. There is no German reference. It just sounds, the Haas, it sounds kind of German, but it's not. So yeah, everywhere you can listen to my music, and I'll be releasing the official music video of Keep On Rolling soon.
Cool.
Yeah, so definitely check that out. It's a great album. I really enjoyed it, and definitely an artist that people need to hear. So go check him out. Bluhauz, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, Rock On. Hope to see you guys again.
All right, that's going to wrap up this week's edition of the Blues Rock Show. For Bluhauz and Willie Witten, I'm Pete Francis. We'll see you next time.